What if I told you that a single technical detail, almost invisible to the naked eye, was to blame for destroying Hamilton's weekend in Brazil, and that Ferrari knew it all along? What happened at Interlagos was not a simple bad result. It was the discovery of a hidden defect that threatens to drag Ferrari into the abyss. Today I'm going to tell you how Frédéric Vasseur uncovered the best-kept secret of the SF25, and how that discovery changed the course of the entire season. Interlagos. A word that by itself evokes history, drama, and glory in Formula One. A circuit that has seen legendary consecrations, impossible comebacks, and resounding falls. But in 2025, that sacred stage of motorsports became the epicenter of an uncomfortable truth that shook the foundations of Ferrari and even more so, those of Lewis Hamilton, who arrived at the Brazilian Grand Prix with the hope of giving a definitive turn to his adventure in red. The context could not be more promising. Ferrari was coming off 2 solid weekends. Charles Leclerc had scored back-to-back podiums in Austin and Mexico, rekindling the illusion that the SF25, although imperfect, was finally finding its place on the grid. Hamilton, for his part, had shown clear signs of progress after a difficult start to the year. There was talk in the paddock that he was finally managing to adapt to the demands of a car that since preseason had proven to be fussy, sensitive, and not very forgiving of the aggressive style that the Briton has cultivated during his career. But Interlagos does not forgive. It is a track where every defect in the car is multiplied by 10, where the slightest design error becomes an unmanageable nightmare. From the first free session on Friday, Ferrari began to see that something was not right. It wasn't just the loss of speed on the straights or an unpredictable balance in high-load corners. It was something deeper. The data did not add up. And most alarming, the differences between the two cars, despite having identical configurations, were too wide to be attributed to the individual performance of the drivers. The situation exploded within hours. Hamilton's car simply didn't work. The 7-time world champion was disconnected from his machine, struggling to keep it within the limits of the track. The team focused on constant reviews, real-time comparisons with Leclerc's car, and desperate telemetry analyses that produced contradictory signals. What was happening? On Saturday morning, after the sprint race, Leclerc offered one of the most forceful statements heard from Ferrari this season. He openly acknowledged that the team was facing a problem they couldn't fully explain. He stated that they were losing excessive time on the straights and that, although they were carrying more downforce, that did not justify the loss. That was a total alarm signal. A public admission that Ferrari was sailing blindly on a track that punishes inaccuracy harshly. Meanwhile, in Hamilton's garage, frustration was growing. Every outing on the track was an ordeal. The car vibrated on the steepest sections, bottomed out in critical areas, and left a driver who, more than ever, needed answers without confidence. In this environment of maximum tension, Vasseur made a key decision: to launch an immediate internal investigation to determine whether the SF25 had a structural defect that had gone unnoticed all year, and that was only now, in the brutally uneven terrain of Interlagos, coming to light. This scandal wasn't just about a bad result. It was a revelation. The evidence that the car with which Ferrari aspired to fight for the title was not only inefficient, it was inherently defective. And the biggest victim of that discovery was not the team. It was Hamilton. A driver who arrived in Maranello with the promise of writing his last chapter at the top, and who now found himself trapped in a project that did not even understand its own mistakes. The technical breaking point of the weekend in Brazil was not the product of a single failed session, nor of a poor setup decision. It was the result of an accumulated structural defect, deeply rooted in the SF25's DNA. And what Ferrari engineers discovered at Interlagos was possibly the biggest design mistake made by the Scuderia in the last 5 years. The SF25 had been developed under an aggressive downforce philosophy, with the aim of maximizing ground effect efficiency. In theory, that should make it a competitive car, especially on technical tracks. But in practice, that same aggressiveness was transformed into vulnerability. And Brazil was the mirror that reflected it with brutal clarity. It all started with a pattern in the telemetry that no one wanted to accept at first. With each lap, Hamilton's car was losing an unusual amount of downforce on the straights and in fast corner transitions. This could not be explained by differences in configuration or driving style. Something deeper was failing. The analysis of the onboard cameras revealed how the SF25 hit the ground violently in certain areas of the circuit, especially in turns 6, 10, and Mergelho. The contact was so severe that on several occasions the car's plank, that obligatory wooden plank at the bottom of the car, visibly jumped off the asphalt, generating sparks, instability, and a critical loss of control. That's when all the alarms went off. The technical team, led by aerodynamics and chassis dynamics engineers, focused their attention on rear ride height management. And the discovery was devastating. To avoid excessive wear of the iron and stay within the FIA technical regulations that allow only 1 mm of maximum wear, Ferrari was forced to raise the car at the rear 2 levels more than ideal. The direct consequence? An abrupt drop in the aerodynamic efficiency of the ground. The SF-25 could not generate stable charge at low altitudes without compromising its physical integrity. This is a tragedy for any ground effect-based car. In the modern era of Formula One, the majority of downforce is generated not by the wings, but by the accelerated airflow passing through Venturi tunnels located in the floor of the car. These tunnels only work optimally if the car drives very close to the asphalt without touching it. Ferrari, by having to raise its height, was basically turning off its main source of downforce. And at Interlagos, this problem was amplified until it became unsustainable. The Brazilian circuit has an altitude of 800 meters above sea level, which means that the air is lighter and the downforce generated naturally is less. Added to this is the surface with potholes, pronounced cambers and very aggressive compression zones. It's a ruthless environment for any car with height and structural rigidity issues. Every bounce of the SF-25 in those sections was a slap in the face to the car's stability. Every impact on the ground was a threat to the pilot's confidence. The most symbolic moment was the 720-degree spin that Hamilton suffered in practice. It was not a human error, but a direct consequence of the bottom of the car hitting the asphalt with such force that it completely destabilized the rear axle. A brutal image which made it clear that Ferrari had no room to play with heights like McLaren or Red Bull did, who could maintain aggressive configurations without punishing their chassis. But the hardest blow was not technical. It was psychological. Because at the end of the day, the team knew that this was not a one-time problem. It was a design weakness that has been present since the first tests in Bahrain, but that had never manifested itself so starkly as in Brazil. And the worst thing, there is no quick solution. It is not corrected with spoiler adjustments or new engine maps. It requires redesigning parts of the floor, the suspension, and even the general concept of the car. Ferrari had built a car that could only compete when conditions were near perfect. At Interlagos, the SF-25 was exposed for what it really is, an unstable machine incapable of operating at its limits without self-destructing. And that revelation didn't just sink the weekend. He called into question the entire 2025 project. When it seemed that the technical ordeal of the SF-25 could no longer escalate, an old demon returned to torment Lewis Hamilton: the tires. Specifically the rear ones. That rear axle, which should be its best ally in traction, stability and corner exit, became its silent and constant enemy throughout the weekend in Brazil. But this problem did not arise out of nowhere. In fact, it has been dragging on since the beginning of the season, and has been one of the main barriers in Hamilton's adaptation to the Maranello car. Unlike Mercedes, where the behavior of the rear axle was more predictable although not perfect, the SF-25 has proven to be unpredictable, capricious, and extremely sensitive to thermal variations. And if under normal conditions it was already difficult to bring the rear tires to the optimal temperature window, Interlagos raised that challenge to unbearable levels. Why is that famous temperature window so important? Because Formula One tires do not work like those of a street car. They have a very narrow range, generally between 85 and 110 degrees Celsius on the surface in which they offer their maximum grip. If they are cold, they will not adhere to the asphalt. If they are too hot, they degrade and lose structure. It is a very delicate balance, and even more so with compounds like the ones Pirelli brought to Brazil, which were already difficult to warm up even for teams like Red Bull. In Hamilton's case, the SF-25 simply wasn't getting the rear tires to reach that key temperature at the right time. And this is especially critical in qualifying, where every tenth matters and you only have one clean lap to set time. In Q2 on Saturday, Hamilton came out with a configuration that in theory should be competitive. But the result was dramatic. He was left out with the 13th fastest time. A brutal blow for a pilot of his caliber. Further analysis revealed that the rear tires never exceeded 82 degrees on average during the launch turn. In other words, they were below their operational range. The car simply had no traction. He skidded at the exit of each corner, constantly oversteered, and forced Hamilton to correct trajectories in each turn. It's like trying to run on an icy track wearing leather shoes. You can be the best runner in the world, but if you don't have grip, you can't do anything. Hamilton, visibly frustrated, summed it up with a devastating phrase: "The setup is fine. We just couldn't get the tires to work." And he was right. The team had done everything possible from the garage. They had tried different warm-up strategies, more aggressive pressures, slower formation laps, but nothing worked. The SF25 is a car that harshly punishes any thermal error and does not have enough tools to compensate with mechanical grip for what it lacks in temperature management. This type of problem not only affects performance, affects trust. And without confidence, Hamilton cannot harness his talent. He can't launch himself when braking, he can't use the curbs aggressively, he can't enter corners with conviction. He becomes a driver who is surviving, not competing. And the most worrying thing is that the calendar does not give him respite. The following tracks, such as Las Vegas or Abu Dhabi, also punish cars that suffer from overheating of the rear axle. If Ferrari does not find an urgent solution, this problem could become a constant that hampers not only Hamilton, but the development of the car for the entire season. In short, what we saw in Brazil was not just a bad weekend. It was the symptom of a deeper illness. And Hamilton knows it. The big question now is whether Ferrari has the tools and time to cure it before it's too late. Let me know in the comments what you think about all this.